Go ahead and pass it. So,
Yeah. All right. So go ahead.
all right, Chad, it's all in you.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you again for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to your club. Give you a little quick introduction. So yes, I am a Shad fanatic. I'm also the author of the Shad on the Fly blog. That's at shadonthefly.com, and the moderator of the Shad on the Fly Facebook group. I'm going to do a little presentation. Hopefully, we can learn a little bit about shad fishing on the St. Johns River. I have been fly fishing for about 15 years. I am not a guide. I'm a mere mortal, probably like a lot of you. I actually work in cybersecurity risk management. Um, I primarily fish by canoe with the little 6 horsepower kicker on it, occasionally still by kayak, but the canoe gets it most of the time. I generally take the boat somewhere and hop out and wade or bank fish, kind of work an area until I find fish. And sometimes I'll hike in or bike in to some areas that are accessible by foot as well. So I can talk a little bit about each of those things. So I started blogging in 2015 and opened my personal fishing diary to the world. It's full of honest accounts of catching fish, sometimes not catching fish and getting skunked, exploring new areas, just close encounters with the wildlife out there, but just really sharing my joy of being out in the middle of nowhere. The site gained a good following and spawned the Shad on the Fly Facebook group. We have a community of about 900, over 900 shad fanatics in the group, most of which are based in Florida, but we have members all up and down the eastern seaboard. We've got members in California, in Oregon, and actually in France and Italy as well. It's a different species there, but they're just as rabid as we are. So anyway, if you're not a member of the Shad on the Fly Facebook group, I encourage you to join. It's a great group of people. Like Charlie said, you're always going to see people posting their reports about whether they caught fish, where they're at, sharing flies, getting into all kinds of debates about whether shad or repeat spawners down here, whether they eat, etc. So it's can get pretty lively, and it's a good group of folks. Um, I'd like to keep this interactive. I'm not sure, maybe Rick, it looks like you're moderating, but if there's questions along the way, I'm happy to try to answer them, and we'll certainly do a Q&A session at the end. I've got a few topics today we'll work through. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with shad fishing on the St. Johns, but we'll start with what is a shad, what are we targeting, and when are they here? We'll talk about some equipment, the rods, reels, and lines that you use to fish for them, some flies and my favorite flies, and we'll talk access locations, how to access by boat, a little bit by foot I can talk about, but maybe I may go long there. So when we get there, I may point you to a couple other resources both on the site and on Amazon. And we'll talk about tactics and show you the gauges that are important if you want to come down to Central Florida and catch a shad. All right, so first off, what is a shad? You may be familiar with like the gizzard shad or threadfin, kind of the stinky bait fish that are in most of our freshwater waterways and lakes. Those are not what we're targeting here. What we're really looking for are the American shad and the hickory shad, and sometimes the blueback herring as well. They don't run in big numbers every year, but every once in a while, I'd say every 3 years, you'll get a good run of bluebacks, and they can be a lot of fun. Smaller than the American and hickory, but still a lot of fun on light tackle. Truth be told, these are all herrings, so they are kind of stinky, but I'll keep it to the larger species, the American and hickory. They are anadromous fish, so they spend their lives in the saltwater and make their way to the freshwater to spawn. The American shad is found up and down the eastern seaboard from Florida to Newfoundland. They typically in Florida get up to about 2 to 3 pounds. The state record is 5.19. I'll say last year we had a run of the biggest fish I've ever seen in Florida. And I know of at least one young man that took a video and a picture of a fish that he weighed that would have beat that state record had he kept it and submitted it. Um, Up north, they tend to get more like 4 to 6 pounds. The world record is 11 pounds, 4 ounces. They were introduced to California in 1871. 10,000 American shad were sent via railway from New York to California, and now most of the rivers are full of them and have giant runs. The Sacramento and American rivers and California now have huge runs from May to July. And I'll say 100 fish days are, it's not even commonplace. I would say just regular now. They have huge runs of fish. The runs on the Columbia River and Oregon can be so thick that they actually interfere with the fish ladders used by the salmon and steelhead. And just a couple of years ago, the count at the Bonneville Dam at the end of the run was 7 million had passed that dam. Um, they've made their way all the way to Alaska. And I just read recently that they may be in the Sea of Cortez now as well. So they are prolific spawners and a great fish for us to target when they come in to do their thing in freshwater. They are known to be repeat spawners in northern states. Supposedly, Florida does not have a repeat spawn. I would question that, but it could get into a heated debate. A year like 2 years ago, where we had very high water, we had a blast of rain late in November that pushed the river up over flood stage again. I would say those fish had everything they needed to come do what they do, to spawn, have plenty of water, plenty of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in that water, the right temperatures in that water to potentially make it back. It would just require somebody to observe it and study it, and we're not really doing that. So it's possible maybe there are some years where they might return spawn. Northern states, every other state on the eastern seaboard, with the exception of Florida, does have repeat spawners. Although I've been reading from accounts of our northern friends on the Facebook group that that seems to be dying off on some rivers based on pollution and whatnot. So the hickory shad is slightly smaller and typically gets 1 to 2 pounds. In Florida, the state record is 2 pounds for 14 ounces. They're found all the way from Florida to the Gulf of Maine, although I've read that that's kind of died down as well in some of the northern states. And some fisheries have actually closed the fishing for hickories. Um, Both of these fish are broadcast spawners, so the American can produce up to 600,000 and the hickory shad up to 400,000 when they spawn. They are broadcast spawners, but they do it over a period of, let's say, 30 to 45 days, every 2 to 3 days, producing maybe 2 to 3,000 eggs. They are known as the poor man's tarpon or salmon. They're great sport fish, long fights, lots of jumps, just a lot of fun on light tackle. The shad run here in Florida generally starts at the beginning of December and will run through March, maybe mid-March. But you can add a month to either side of that based on conditions, based on water levels, what temperature was. If we got a blast of cool weather in October, which doesn't seem to happen a whole lot anymore, that can push fish early. I've heard of people catching fish in November. I have not. I generally catch my first shad in December. We run a first shad of the season contest every year in the Facebook group, and I think the first fish that won that contest was maybe the first week of December. They do have game fish status, so if you're going to keep fish, you can only keep 10 total across all three species, American hickory or blueback per day. Let's see, any questions there? All right, I'll move on. Okay, so folks can have a difficult time identifying the American and hickory. So one thing to consider is obviously the hickory shad is slightly smaller. To me, the American shad always has more of that football shape, where the hickory has got kind of a keel shape there. But the big way to identify them is that the hickory shad has a superior mouth, so that bottom jaw, when the jaws are closed, will protrude some, where the Americans line up evenly. So that's a really easy way to tell. You can also see kind of the eye of the hickory sits a little bit higher on the body. That's always a telltale. And at least early in the season, I think that the hickories are much darker on their top line than Americans tend to be. They'll tend to be more iridescent. So we always get the question, can you eat them? And I think that depends on who you ask and what your knife skills are like. My friend and guide Mark Benson shared his recipe with me years ago, and that's to scale it, gut it, clean it, dry it off real well, season it heavily with salt and pepper, pin it to a cedar plank, cook it next to an open fire for 2 hours, ensuring they get plenty of smoke permeation. And when it's cooked all the way through, throw the fish in the trash and eat the cedar plank. Um, he's not a fan. Uh, all kidding aside, the American shad, the Alyssa sapidissima, translates loosely into savory or tasty shad, and the Alyssa mediocris, the hickory, translates into average shad, so maybe not so tasty shad. There's a rich history in America. If you ever read McPhee's book, Founding Fish, that tells a interesting story of how us as settlers survived on this fish. So it certainly was eaten long back in our history, but has maybe fallen out of favor today. The roe is definitely considered a delicacy. I know in North and South Carolina they go nuts for it, and you can find it even in fish markets. Let's see, it's got 700 bones in it, so you have to be committed to filleting them and have pretty decent knife skills, which I've never gained. I have, however, prepared it several different ways. I've slow cooked it in the oven at 200 degrees for 4 hours, which supposedly dissolves the bones. I didn't find that. I was still sort of picking hair out of my mouth with the fine bones. I've wrapped it in bacon. Everything tastes better in bacon. However, I actually kind of prefer it basted in butter and citrus, maybe stuffed with some couscous made with orange juice. Not bad. Still a lot of bones to work around. Um, Classic delicacy, the fried roe in bacon grease. Mix it with eggs or serve it on crackers. It's not bad. It's just something you have to, for me, it's something about the look of the roe sacks that's kind of hard to get around. To me, it looks like something out of a Ridley Scott movie. Think of that scene from Alien where the chest burster comes out. There's a distinct resemblance there, but hey, some people love it. Really, if I'm going to cook one or if I'm going to keep a couple, the way I like to prepare it is to cold smoke it for a couple of hours. Then you can pick all of the big bones out and any of the fine bones that you can't quite get. The food processor takes care of, and in the process of preparing the dip. There's a good picture of the chest burster versus Rosac.
Which one is which?
To me, there's a distinct resemblance. So yeah, Sigourney Weaver approves. Okay, so we've talked about whether you can eat shad. Again, I generally am a catch and release guy, but if if I gill hook one, I'll keep it. Maybe I'll keep a second to make some shad dip. So we talked about whether you can eat shad. How about do shad eat? Has anybody in the room ever heard that shad do not eat in freshwater? I don't know if I can see hands, but there's usually a few. Um, how about has anyone heard that shad do not eat in freshwater until after they have spawned?
No.
Just wondering if anyone still believes this. And if you do, I would encourage you to explore more of our fishery because it is pretty common nowadays for at least everyone in fishermen in Florida. Um, I think the debate is kind of over for us. There's a growing body of circumstantial evidence, pictures, videos, written reports, and like the debate is done for us. Most of us that fish these runs every year experience them regurgitating mosquito fish or small crustaceans. If you clean one, a lot of times you will find partially uh, partially processed fish. So you can see here on the picture on the left, that is a shad that TJ Bettis from Orlando Outfitters caught. You can tell it's an American based on its jaws there, and it was just plumb full of mosquito fish or gambusia here. Um, Over on the right, this is a picture that Swade Langston, who has won our first shot of the year contest 3 times, took, and you can see small crustaceans, and again, a gambusia there. And like I said, I experience this just about every year. Um, there's an ongoing debate with our northern friends on whether they eat. They think that we can't tell the difference between hickories and Americans. We can. The hickories are known to eat. They're known to be repeat spawners. But you can tell here, there's a great picture that is definitely an American shad on the left. Um, I think it's a bit of an old wives' tale at this point. It's been passed down, through C. Boyd Pfeiffer's book, Shad Fishing, through McPhee's book, etc. But I think there's a growing body of evidence that they do eat, and a lot of folks will say, "Hey, the American shad's not a repeat spawner. They don't need the calories to get back to the ocean." Um, the fact is, it's not a different species of fish, so why are they just automatically doomed to die? And why wouldn't they eat along the way like some northern fish do? I believe University of Virginia did a study where it showed that they definitely in northern waters eat after the spawn. Um, Recently, an FWC biologist, Reed Heil, has commented on this and said they're indeed eating while they're spawning, and because they're here, 30 plus days and spawning every couple of days, dropping 2 to 3,000 eggs, that those calories likely go back into egg production and may actually expand how long they can spawn. So, any questions there? I know that can drive a heated debate with my northern friends. So, not sure if we have any in the room.
We believe you.
I'd encourage you to experience it from like Puzzle Lake and upstream is where you're most likely to run into large groups of feeding fish, and it's super exciting to catch them when they're really keyed into these gambusia. All right, let's talk about a refresh the equipment here. This might be a refresher to most everyone in the room. I'm sure you likely have something in your quiver already that will do the job. I like a 9 foot 4 to 7 weight with the 5 weight rod being the sweet spot for me. To me, a 5 weight you can cast pretty decently in the wind, but you can still feel the fish while you're fighting it. Helps you land the fish pretty quickly as well. I know a lot of folks start with maybe a 7 or 8 weight in Florida, and you can certainly use that, but not going to be quite as much fun fighting the fish. But certainly I've done it. You can go all the way down to a 3 weight. I don't recommend it. To me, it's not fair to the fish. They're here to spawn. Most of us are catch and release fishermen, so it's in their best interest to catch them quickly and release them quickly. Let's see, reels. Again, nothing too fancy here. A large or standard reel that matches the rod weight. You probably already have it. Lines, to me, any weight forward with the Dacron backing will work. I tend to gravitate towards the Wolf Ambush triangle taper line myself. I like a shooting line. There are areas where I'm waiting where there could be kind of a backstop of high growing grass, and you may not have much room to false cast behind you. So I like the Wolf Ambush, just allows me to shoot line with I don't know, 20 feet of head out. I don't recommend sink tip lines anymore or full sink lines, with maybe one exception. Nowadays, you can pick up, I think, between 5 and 15 foot poly or versa that allows you to attach a tapered sinking tip to your regular weight forward line. And you can buy those in different sink rates, I think up to 6 inches per second. And for most people's fishing, that's going to do you just fine. Um, I'll talk about one situation where I might encourage a full sink if you have it, but I definitely would not go buy one. Um, so that's going to be, early in the season, you're going to be kind of fishing higher water, maybe down bottom. As the water starts to recede within its banks and you need to go for a lighter presentation, just a standard 9 foot leader and tip it. 2X is plenty, just in case you get into a big hybrid or maybe a big gar, mudfish, whatnot. 3 or 4X would be fine for a shad. I don't know if we have any two-handed casters or fans, I have become a huge fan of fishing for shad with a two-hander. Switch rod has become my favorite. Really, anything between a 10 and 12 foot is perfect, especially for us that are using canoes or kayaks. Right now, I'm fishing with a 10-foot, 10-inch Echo SR. Um, I got into two-handed casting in 2016, I think. I bought my first rod thinking, hey, this would be wonderful to go surf fish with, and, fish from the shore, jetties. I don't know if any of you know John Grosta, that runs the fly shop at Bass Pro in Orlando. He's a huge overhead casting fan with the two-handed switch rods and full spays. But as I started to learn the cast, the two-handed cast, it occurred to me, hey, there's a lot of the St. John's. I could hit the other side of the river with this thing, and it really turned into my tool of choice for fishing for shad. I don't know the last time I've used it in the surf. I just love kind of the zen of casting. You can do it all day. 60 to 100 foot cast is just kind of standard and typical. No fatigue doing that, no sore shoulders. You can do it all day. So again, a lot of the St. John's where it gets channelized into these braided channels. That's you don't even need a 100-foot cast to fish the opposite bank. I like a large arbor reel for a two-handed rod, mainly just to store the bulky head and tip. Um, Generally, that's got 150 feet of an amnesia running line on it. If you're going to set up a two-handed setup, I would not use mono or Dacron as the backing. I would just go ahead and save yourself the headache and use a 20 to 30 pound amnesia. It's a low memory line that you can use for a shooting line. For heads and tips, you have two different options: the Skagit or Scandinavian. I fish both, so I'll generally use the Skagit earlier in the season when the water is high and you've got high discharge. And the Skagit allows you to turn over heavy tips, big flies, which we're not really throwing big flies, but we could certainly be throwing heavy flies. It's built for waterborne casts like the Snap T, the Double Spay, but it lands heavy and clunky. So if you're trying to make a delicate presentation to maybe fish in shallow water or spooky fish, it can land heavy and scare fish. The neat thing about it is you can swap the tips, anything from an intermediate, which is about 1.5 inches per second sink rate, all the way down to T20s, which are 10 inches per second. I certainly don't need that here, but it's nice to have the options. Here, I'll just use a 6 foot level leader of just 10 pound mono on the end of the Skagit tip. Like I said, I'll also fish a Scandinavian setup, and I'll do that later in the season where I don't need the heavy tip and I may not need as heavy of a fly. On the Scandinavian, you can easily cast a bead chain fly, but if you start to get up into like a small 5/32 hourglass, you're going to have some problems turning it over. If you do need to get a little deeper with the Scandinavian line, the Scandi is like a tapered, typical kind of weight forward type setup, but set up as a shooting line. You may need to get down a little bit deeper. You can add a Versa leader or poly leader just like you would a single hand rod. Neat thing about the Scandinavian, again, it's a more delicate presentation. You can use airborne casts like the single spay, the snake roll, and the list goes on. On these, I'll use just a typical, like I said, if I need to get down, I'll use a poly or Versa leader and a 10-foot length, or I'll just use a standard 9 foot tapered leader. I'll skip the conventional. I will make one note. I know we're all fly fishermen, but particularly early in the season, I will use a 7 foot ultralight rod just because you can cover more water more quickly if they're not showing themselves. So I can work the water column a little quicker, find the fish, put it down, and go get my fly set up.
And
Any
what
questions?
lure are you fishing on the conventional?
So I like the little white 1.5 inch shad, little plastic shad. that you can pick up pretty much anywhere. It's just a small, soft plastic in white. I may have a picture of it in one of the following slides. The other thing I like on them is like a standard shad spoon. Okay, flies. Got a few rules of thumbs here. Let's see. Small, so size, I'll say 2 to 6. Generally colorful. I like some moderate flash. I tend to have better luck with moderate flash versus flies tied completely out of flashy material. I don't know why. You generally want flies that are weighted to get the fly down, especially if you don't see fish actively feeding up top. Um, so you can wrap them with lead wraps, bead chain, hourglass. I tend to tie flies now with 5/32 hourglass eyes, and I'll usually tie a version of the same fly with bead chain, so that way I can control my depth. So colorful contrasts and sometimes not. Having naturals is also a good idea. I will say probably one of the best performing early season flies that I've seen is strangely just a tan Crazy Charlie with gold flash and the wing tied 2 inches long. So a big fly on a size 2. I don't know what they think it is. It must resemble the grass shrimp coming off of the floodplain, but that's a really good performer early in the season. Also, just some standard, you know, unweighted flies can be useful because, again, if you run across fish that are feeding up top, you don't want to cast a fly that's going to make it under them. If you go to the Shad on the Fly website, there is a collection of videos that I have recorded of of tying different shad flies. It started with the original 41 flies found in C. Boyd Pfeiffer's book, Shad Fishing, that was published in 1975. And that was sort of the catalyst of me starting the blog was I could not find any demonstration videos on how to tie those flies, so I decided to take it on myself. It's grown. I think there's over 60 flies out there now, including St. John's favorites, which really are just a set of flies that ride hook tip up. And then some Econ Lockhatchee favorites. That's sort of a sub selection of those flies that are scaled down and meant to target shad when we're sight fishing for them in years where they may make it up the Econ Lockhatchee past Snow Hill Road. Pretty neat to sight fish for them. Sorry about that. Again, yeah, lures, kind of the same idea. Road runners, shad darts, shad spoons, small little jigs. That will do it. So here are some of my favorite flies. So if you look up here in the top left, that's just a kip-tailed clouser. If I had to choose one fly to fill up fly boxes with, that would be it. I tie them in orange, pink, orange and white, pink and white, chartreuse. I don't know why I don't have confidence in chartreuse for this fish. Lots of people catch them on chartreuse, but I just don't seem to do it. Orange and white is my go-to. In the center is just a soft hackle shad fly. That guinea fowl gives it a nice contrast and lots of action. If you have any steel headers or salmon fishermen out there, you probably recognize up top right here is a comet. This is what I would call my standard alternate in my box. I love that. Again, a lot of innate action because of the hackle. Below that is a hairwing gambusia fly and the fry fly. So you can see again, kind of naturals. These are unweighted. They just have epoxy heads on them. And these are perfect profiles for when shad are keyed into small gambusia as they come off the floodplain as the water recedes back into its banks. Just to let you know, colloquially, I have a hard time saying that word. Colloquially, we call this the squeegee here, and there are some different depths and different areas that I'll share with you when that happens. And that's really just when all of the bait is coming off the floodplain as the water recedes within its banks, and it's just a smorgasbord for the fish. There's a feeding frenzy going on with all species. It's an absolute blast. Just to let you know, in the kind of middle section by Lake Harney there, um, where CS Lee, the launch CS Lee is a very popular spot heading up to the mouth of the Econ. The squeegee is happening this week. So I'm itching to get out there, but I'm still working stiff. In the center is just the classic shad dart, and then on the left is just a peacock and partridge. I tie these down in size 10s and 12s. Again, if I'm fishing up on the Econ Lock Hatchery, trying to sight fish for them on a long, like 15 to 18 foot leader and tippet when the fish are real spooky, clear water and real spooky. We'll skip over the lures because we're all fly fishermen here. Okay, so let's talk access. There's a couple of things I want to share. So, you most likely know that the St. John's is kind of split up into three basins. The lower, which I believe is up towards you, towards Jacksonville, and then the middle, which is here in the Central Florida area, and then the upper basin is kind of heading up towards Middle River and the headwaters of the St. John's. In Central Florida, we actually break down the middle basin as lower middle basin and upper middle basin. And the reason being is the river is much different in those two areas. So the lower middle basin is what we call Shad Alley, and that's the area associated with the Florida Shad Derbies of old. That is still a solid producing area, but it's bigger water. You definitely need, a skiff or something larger there. There can be a lot of boat traffic. I don't know why these like bass boats that love racing each other love this section of river, but you'll see them out there. It's not a great place for a canoe and kayak. You could probably be all right and to sit on top, but you may not be able to kind of reach the bottom where the fish might be. This is that one area where I said maybe one exception to the full sink line might be here, where if you had one, yeah, bring it out. But I wouldn't go buy one because really a 15-foot sink tip will generally do you okay. There are three launches in this area: Cameron White, Mullet Lake Park, and Lemon Bluff. I've got a couple of maps I can show you quickly as well. The upper middle basin is from Lake Harney up to the Econ, Puzzle Lake, and to SR50, and that's probably the most popular area now. There's two boat launches there, CS Lee and Hatbill Park. Um, this is the area that really there's good water depth. It's easy for both access through boat if you want to fish from the boat. When the water gets down into the, let's say, 3 foot levels on the Gages, which I'll show you in a minute, there's plenty of places to get out and bank fish or wade in. You can launch at CS Lee and be at the mouth of the Econ in less than a mile. And really, that whole strait can be full of fish depending on the time of year. Puzzle Lake can be challenging to navigate from this section, particularly in low water. If you have a plotter, that helps. Hatbill can be a little difficult to navigate as well. So you'll see more airboats and mud boats in that section. Large vessels may struggle in this area as the water starts to get deep. There's a big sandbar right past the bridge that I've seen plenty of people get hung up on, and then it gets to be an interesting show of when they're trying to push their boats off and yelling at kids and wives. So just beware. The upper basin is really from Highway 50 all the way up to 520, and then beyond that is Middle River and the headwaters. I don't spend much time up there, but from 50 to 520 is an amazing area. If you go during the week, you'll likely have the place to yourself. For some reason, this section intimidates a lot of people. It might be because it has the largest concentration of alligators over 10 feet in the world, and you will see plenty of them. If you go out during the week, you probably won't run into many fishermen, but just beware the tour boats, the airboats out there that do the tours are massive, so just beware of that. Like I said, I'm sorry about that. I do access some areas and host generally at least one hike a year where we hike out and do some fishing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we could get way into the weeds, but if you are interested in doing any hikes, I would recommend that you pick up a book by Luc Desjardins called Wade Fly Fishing the Upper St. Johns River Basin, Florida for American Shad. I know that just rolls off the tongue. It really is a great book. Even if you're not looking to hike, it is full of treasure maps. I'll say that it's worth picking up. If you're interested in maybe hiking with a group that I host. We generally do these as pop-up events now, where based on fishing conditions and where we found fish, we'll set up a hike and maybe bring in 6 to 10 people depending on where we're headed. And quickly here, these are just the maps. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but up here on the left is Lake Monroe. We've got Lake Jessup here. Here's Cameron White, the boat launch. This is the Shad Alley uh, section of the river. One note here, if you happen to catch this on a southwest wind, the wind will push the dirty water from Lake Jessup into the clean water in the river and set up kind of this wall of muddy water. And it can be great hybrid fishing, largemouth bass, and at the right time of year, you can catch a lot of shad right here as well. So if you happen to be headed in to this section of river, check out the wind gauges as well. And if it's blowing from the southwest, you may not have to move more than about 200 yards from the launch to catch fish. This is the upper middle basin. So this is State Road 46 here. This is Lake Harney. You can see this is the Econ-Lac-Hatchie. So the mouth is right here, not much of the boat ride at all. This is Puzzle Lake here. You can also access the Hatbill Park launch from 46. Just be aware that this is a good 5 mile dirt road. It's usually in pretty decent condition, but there's been a lot of rain. Bring your four-wheel drive. If you're going to launch a boat there, other than a canoe or a kayak, I would let you know that the launch is very steep there. I've seen people have problems getting the boat back on the trailer. Then you can see the State Road 50 ramp down here. And then the upper basin, again, this is the State Road 50 launch. Come all the way down to 520. There's not a launch on, on 528. There is a launch on 520. Again, if you head upstream, you're headed through Lake Poinsett, through Lake Washington, and up towards the headwaters. There is a weir after Lake Washington, which I've heard, depending on water levels, you can actually see shad jumping over that weir or kind of park right at the weir, anchor up, and catch plenty right there. I've never done that. It's too big water for me. Again, you can kind of see how braided and channelized this is down here. It's just an amazing area to explore, and you can generally have it to yourself on a weekday.
Can
All
you
right,
answer
we'll
a
talk.
question?
Yeah, we have a question.
So
Sure.
where's the power lines?
Okay, so power lines. Let me go back here. It'd be hard to see here. Here's power lines. So power lines actually within the Tosahatchee Wilderness Management Area. And that's generally where I launch my canoe. There's not an actual boat ramp there. I've got to take the canoe in on the roof of the Toyota. It used to not really be a big deal. Powerline Road was a real pretty road. There's cool old wooden bridges, just real scenic, kind of flood side ditches and easements on the side that held alligators and lots of birds. But a couple of years ago, there was a washout during a hurricane that took down the culverts between two bridges. So Powerline Road is actually closed indefinitely. And I just talked to a ranger out there last week, and they said it may never be fixed. There's an argument about whether the power company owns the road or whether the WMA does, and the WMA doesn't have any money to do it. So, unfortunately, if you want to get to the river now, you have to take an alternate route, and I can't think of the name of this road right offhand. But anyway, it adds an additional 45 minutes once you get into the WMA before you get to the river. It can be a rough ride. It was high and dry this week when I fished, and they've done some improvements to the road to hopefully keep it from getting washed out there. So, but the year prior, I mean, four-wheel drives were required, and even then, I was seeing people get stuck.
Thank you.
All right, tactics. How do we find fish and what to do to catch them? If you're lucky, you find fish feeding up top, you anchor up or hop out and just go to work and have a blast of a day. But that's generally not how it works. But like any fish, look for areas of the river where it splits. Look for areas of confluence. Look for bends. Make sure you check out and fish the heads and tails of those pools on bends. Deeper pools can have fish kind of sitting outside of the current. A lot of times they'll line up in single file lines, and if your cast is more than a foot to the left or right, they won't bite. So just something to consider. Pay attention to seams and eddies. So like anywhere that there's current, there's likely fish. Look for noticeable changes in speed, depth, or width of the river. Def Definitely check out areas that have sloughs or creeks feeding into the main river, particularly if the wind might be pushing bait out of them. That's a great place for feeding fish. Definitely look for terns, sparrows, seagulls, etc., feeding from the air. If they're feeding from the air, there's likely fish feeding under. May not be shad, may be. Definitely watch for surface activity. A lot of us tend to motor through areas, but if something kind of catches your eye, maybe put the motor in idle or turn it off and sit for a minute. A lot of times, once you see the wake of a boat go by, you'll start to see them come back up to the surface and start working bait again. You can always troll, particularly if you have a conventional rod or two on the boat. And once you hook up with the fish, just anchor there and switch over to your fly gear. My buddy Mark Benson could probably explain this a little better than me because he's a biologist. But shad are looking for crunchy bottom. So they're looking for areas where there's lots of current and not just to broadcast the eggs, but also to keep that bottom clean and crunchy and not build up like a deep silt layer that will suffocate the fertilized eggs. So again, if you have a sounder, you might be able to see that, like a nice hard bottom. If you're fishing on bottom with your flies and you're pulling up muck and garbage, you're definitely not in the right place. Ultimately, find the current and you'll likely find fish. Let me see here. So how do we catch them? Most of the time we're swinging flies, and I like to cover the entire water column. So usually I'll just start with a short cast, let that fly swing.
Has anybody got a quarter? Hey, Chad, you're back. We lost you for about a minute.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just when you were telling us how to catch them.
The big secret.
You had
Okay.
everybody was leaning forward and then it went blank.
I left you hanging. Okay, well, hopefully I'm back for good. So I think where I was headed with that was how do we catch them? First, let's swing some flies. So you want to cover the water column, maybe make a short cast, let that fly swing all the way downstream, and then just make short 6-inch or so strips. Just strip, 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 strip. You can make a figure-of-8 retrieve. That's also a good way to do it. And if you don't catch a fish, lift the line, make another short cast, maybe this time throw a mend or two into it and allow that fly to sink a little bit further and have a more aggressive swing up the water column. And then I'll usually make a medium length cast, repeat. A long length cast, repeat. If I didn't catch a fish, I'm going to move 10 steps in either direction. If you're on a boat, maybe let the anchor line out a little longer, move your boat 10, 15 yards and do it again. You can also conventional cast and retrieve, especially when you see fish working up top. Again, you don't want the fly to sink to the bottom, so once it hits the water, start stripping and they'll come right after it. I've seen big groups of fish coming after gambusia. The fly hit the water and either they hit it then or you just start double hand stripping and they're coming tearing. It's just a blast. So yeah, swing flies or not. It just depends on what the conditions say. And same thing, fish deep and sometimes shallow. Let the fish tell you what they want. All right, gauges. These are the gauges to keep an eye on, and I will show you on the Shad on the Fly website where you can easily find links to them as well. So no reason to write them down or anything like that. Let me find my notes here. Okay. So for the first one, this is probably the most popular. Again, the gauge that's by upstream of Lake Harney by C.S. Lee. It's going to cover Puzzle, Indian Mounds, and probably most of Hatbills where I'll look here. To me, water is optimal at by boat at 5 feet or under on the Lake Harney gauge. 4 feet is game for wading, but you're going to be knee to thigh in a lot of places, especially over on the east bank, right by the mouth of the Econ. You're going to be knee to thigh there. The west bank actually has some higher ground there that you might be more, to knee level. Any of the sloughs that you might pass coming in, there you're going to be waist high until you get below 3 feet. I mentioned the squeegee earlier. Here in this section of river, we're looking for water between 3.5 and 2.5 feet. That's the range where lots of bait's being blown off the floodplain. I prefer like 2.8 is my sweet spot for wading the river there out of CS Lee. It's pretty much all the water is within its banks. Number two here is the meter by Lake Jessup's outlet. This is by Cameron White, Government Cut, Shad Alley, Mullet Lake. Honestly, depth is not as relevant here because you're not going to be wading it. You're going to have to fish by boat. So just know that 3 feet or under is optimal. Number three is the gauge at Christmas, Florida at SR50. So that's going to be Hatbill, maybe the upper end of Hatbill, Tosahatchee, Seven Palms, Pawpaw, all the way up to 520, really. The water south of 50 is best navigable by boat under 6 feet and above 3.5, in my opinion. Any higher than 6, it looks like a big lake and can be difficult to navigate. Even with the plotter, it can be difficult. And then if you get around 3.5 feet, you're going to start bumping bottom. You might need to get the pole out and pull the boat some. You might have to hop out and push the boat or pull the boat, which gets a little sketchy because, again, this is the area that has the largest concentration of 10-foot alligators in the world. Um, at 6 feet, most of the channels will be somewhat visible, making navigation easier. And the squeegee in this section is really between 6 feet and 5 feet, so it's kind of happened unless the rain we just got may have bumped it up. I fished there on New Year's Day and found good numbers of fish. They weren't terribly cooperative, but I saw quite a few and caught enough to make me happy, make it worth the trip. Let's see, number four is the water meter near Cocoa. And to me, this is more relevant to crossing and fishing Lake Poinsett and Middle River up to Lake Washington. It's more useful there than it really is 520 and 528. I will generally look at the SR50 gauge and use that as my gauge if I'm fishing that section. And then number five finally is the gauge at Snow Hill Road. So I mentioned there are some years where large runs of fish will make it up the Econ. They won't end up in this section where it's very clear and shallow. They'll tend to hang in troughs on turns and pools, and it's just amazing to sight fish for them. So on those years, that's the gauge you want to look out for. Its best fishing is 3 feet to 2. If you do go to the website, you'll see over in resources, there is a link to the boat launches. So that'll give you the address to all the boat launches that we talked about here, and also links to all those gauges. All right, I think that's all I have for my presentation. Once again, appreciate your invitation. I hope you learned something or at least enjoyed yourself. I'm happy to open it up to a Q&A session if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, would you talk a little bit more about the squeegee that's happening this week?
Sure. So again, I think down by CS Lee, which is probably the most popular area today. That's happening between really I'll say between 4 and 2.5 feet. So really the water is emptying off of the floodplain and all those grass shrimp and gambusia, other small minnows, other crustaceans are being washed into the river. And it just becomes a big conveyor belt of food, is how my friend Mark Benson has described it for years. So you can catch just about anything in the river. It's a big feeding frenzy. You'll catch largemouth bass. You'll catch hybrids in this section, gar, any panfish species you can think of, and of course, shad. Right now, there's good numbers of hickories being caught there. I don't know if I've seen an American get caught in that section yet, but they should be there any day.
So, well, when it's that shallow, what do you use for a boat? You have to have a kayak or something?
Yeah, I would say at 2.5 feet, if you have a skiff, you can make it. There is a sandbar right by the bridge that you'll have to navigate. If you go upstream and around and cross on the other channel, it might actually be easier depending on how deep your boat drafts. And you'll make it past that sandbar, come up in the middle of the channel towards the econ, even at 2.5 feet, 2 feet. I see skiffs down there all the time. But
Chad,
certainly canoes and kayaks are always a good option down there too. You're not having to paddle more than about a mile.
Chad, you talk about sight fishing. Is the water clear down there or just up in near the econ, or is it tannic like the majority of the St. John's?
Yeah, so I'll say on the St. John's at the econ, the water is still tannic, and the section of the econ that I mentioned can be good for sight fishing. That water can get very clear as long as we haven't had any rain. Typically, the econ is very tannic as well, but you have all of these kind of moving sand flats within the econ, which is just smaller body of water. So I think that helps sort of clear the water when it's low, and then you'll be able to see fish kind of in the troughs, in turns. Sometimes they're down on bottom on the deeper pool, so you might have to blind cast. At any rate, it's a great hike if you're ever down here and just want to go see a beautiful part of the state.
I got two questions. First question, what species of shad would I be seeing over on the Santa Fe River? Slash the Swanee River?
Swanee, that is what is that? The Gulf shad? Yeah, on the West Coast. The Americans and hickories don't make it to the Gulf Coast. I think there's a species known as the Gulf shad there. I've never fished for them there.
I was over there a few months and we saw a pile of them up in the river. They definitely weren't gizzards. So that was the first
Okay.
time I there. It was really interesting.
Okay,
Second,
cool.
you said they were up here to spawn. Where are they the rest of the year? Are they offshore? Or
That's right. Most people say they make the run to Bay of Fundy. As they come out as fry out of the St. John's, they will swim all the way north to the Bay of Fundy and then come back down to spawn. I've had conversations with biologists that would agree with that, and others that say, there's probably a large probability that they're sitting offshore somewhere in a deep hole and not making that run. I mean, it's a herring. Everything in the ocean wants to eat it. That's a long distance to travel.
Any more questions? All right, Chad, thank you very much. That was a very impressive presentation. And, I've lived and fished in Florida all my life, and I thought I'd fished all over Florida. This is a fishery I wasn't even aware that existed. So thank you very much for enlightening me and hopefully us.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. And again, I'd like to encourage each of you, if you haven't joined the Shad on the Fly Facebook group, to do so. It's a great group of friends.
It is. All right, I'll be back in touch and I'll see you at the boat ramp one day, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good evening.
Appreciate it. Thank you. How many people do we have? Just Rick sign in off-site? Is that all there was?
Yes.
Okay.
You put a lot into that presentation. Sorry, you put a lot of information.
He did. He put a lot of effort into that for somebody who basically doesn't get anything in return except a little bit of applause. That's what I say. They go to a lot of effort, so I would in turn like to have a good crowd here for these people.
Like a hat from